Just imagine it with me for a second. Shinx, the sequel. Blockbuster hit, billions at the box office within the first 3 hours of theatrical release. Everyone's happy, everyone's crying, everybody's safe, and I'm crying and clapping because my son is the star that he was always meant to be. Hey, hiya, what's up y'all? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. So I actually wasn't planning on doing this video this month. However, based on the last video that we did in regards to Generation 5's remakes, there was no way we couldn't talk about this a little bit sooner. For some context, in the previous video, I asked you guys what kind of aspects you would like to see changed from the originals when we inevitably get our hands on the Gen 5 remakes. Some of you talked about graphics, some of you talked about mechanics. All well and good, that's exactly what I asked for. However, one of the more prominent and common opinions that you guys shared is that in some way, shape, or form, Black 2 and White 2 needs to be involved with these remakes somehow. And honestly, you guys are completely correct, and I absolutely 100% agree. Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 are in this weird, awkward limbo when it comes to the Pokemon series. They are the first of their kind to do what they did. In Generation 3, we had Gen 1 remakes. In Generation 4, we had Gen 2 remakes. But in Generation 5, we had sequels. We weren't sure what to make of that. Why did they break the pattern all of a sudden? For both prior generations, we had gotten a definitive edition as well as remakes for one of the previous generations. So at that point with Generation 5, we were fully expecting Pokemon Gray as well as Gen 3 remakes. Thinking back, it is a little silly to have believed that we were going to get Gen 3 remakes that relatively close. You know, it kind of makes sense in retrospect, but regardless, any cycle, any pattern that we started to see was completely broken with the idea of sequels, utilizing a familiar region with new added elements. Now, me personally, at the time, I was about like 12 or 13, so I was absolutely ecstatic to get my hands on that. At the time, I wasn't really on the internet very much, so I didn't really see how people were feeling about the idea of getting sequels as opposed to anything else we had gotten prior. From what I'm understanding, the reception to Generation 5 in general wasn't as ecstatic as I remember it to be, but again, I was very isolated in that aspect. I just kind of did my own thing. But obviously, as a PokeTuber over these last couple of years, I have seen a massive change up, and now more than ever, people feel like they need to see these games again. And I clearly very much agree on that. But even more so, I kind of want to take it a step further here. You can completely disagree with me when I say this. I would not blame you because this is probably quite the take you're going to hear right now. But I prefer the idea of sequels over remakes. And so with that being said, you have an idea of what we're going to be talking about today. So why don't you go ahead, get yourself cozy, maybe grab yourself a little dessert of some kind. Can I recommend a cherry pie with some chili on there? And why don't we go ahead why I would prefer to have sequels over remakes. Now, before we get directly into that, let me just state the fact that I still believe that remakes in of themselves still hold a great importance. Most of the time, remakes have been nothing but a benefit to this franchise. Generally speaking, they allow for older players to re-experience these games in a new, fresh light, while also allowing newer players to get their hands on these games but can experience them in a modern way. And when I say something like that, that doesn't just apply to Pokemon. Hell, one of my favorite games of all time is Final Fantasy VII Remake. I've always adored Final Fantasy VII and all of its messages, all of its characters, all of its designs, and all of the ideas that it's brought to the table when it comes to RPGs. However, in a graphical and mechanical sense, it is a little more on the dated side. I mean, hey, to be fair, the game came out in the late 90s, man. Regardless of how I feel about the game, and I do love it, it is very easy for modern gamers to turn away from something like that because it is on the more dated side. Which is why something like Final Fantasy VII Remake is so incredibly important to me. It still manages to go out of its way to capture the complete essence of the original while not taking away almost anything that the original had to offer. which is kind of crazy because when you think about it, a lot of that game's messages still hold up pretty damn well today, but that's not what we're here to talk about. All of this brings me back to Pokemon, and in that regard, I do still very much say that having remakes are incredibly important for the Pokemon franchise, almost more so than ever. One of the other primary reasons is for preservation's sake. Despite how anyone may feel about the Gen 4 remakes, you have to admit at the very least, it's a way to play Gen 4 legally. I mean, granted, I do still technically have the original copy of Pokemon Diamond on my old DS, however, not everybody has that option, especially people that didn't grow up in that era. Or maybe you just got into Pokemon really late. The point is, not everybody has access to the originals. So, at the very least, in this format, people have a way to experience that generation of Pokemon the way they want to, when they want to, on their modern consoles. And of course, the other reason being, again, it's just a more modern way to experience these games. We haven't used things like temporary TMs and permanent HMs in a very long time now. So bringing forth these older games while implementing modern philosophies make them much easier for a modern audience to absorb. Which is why I bring up things like Final Fantasy VII Remake, or even earlier in the year of 2024 with Persona 3 Reload. I'm just stating across the board here that there's a lot of companies that could definitely follow in Pokemon style in bringing forth these older games with newer technology in mind. When it comes to Pokemon though, the only real reason that anybody has been nervous about remakes going forward is because of the 4th gen remakes. The only reason that we're even having this conversation right now is because of how the 4th gen remakes turned out. And that kind of brings me into the next topic here. Remakes, in the long-term grand scheme of things, can start to get a little iffy. You and I, for example, have grown up with this series, played pretty much every mainline game in the series, and most likely their remakes. And both you and I can absolutely acknowledge the fact that for newcomers to the series, or people in general that have grown up with Pokemon but just simply didn't play Generation 4, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is a great game for them to have, and it's absolutely worth their time and money. They are experiencing a brand new story, brand new characters, a brand new region, and brand new mechanics. Or I guess in the instance of those games, very refined mechanics. For those new players, that is completely unaccessed and uncharted territory, so they are having a completely new experience. The reason players like you and I were a little upset with the outcome of Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is for a multitude of reasons. The primary reason being, it wasn't a new experience for us at all. Besides the games being completely rebuilt in a 3D engine, we got very minimal changes, like the underground and quote-unquote character customization, and instead of HMs being tied to a specific Pokemon, they were tied to your Pokédex. Outside of that though, we've got the exact same region, the exact same music, the exact same characters, and the exact same story. We even got the same top-down style that the originals had. And that's where the differences become extremely vast, because the $60 that I spent versus the $60 that somebody who's never played 4th gen spent is very different. And so here we are almost 2 decades later, pressed because we spent an absurd amount of money for an almost 20-year-old game. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to all of the remakes in the Pokemon series, right? The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd gen remakes were all phenomenal in their own right. At the time of their release, they managed to modernize the older games that came before them in a unique way. So obviously, as somebody whose favorite was always 4th gen, I was a little petty that we couldn't get something like Mega Evolution or newer Pokemon in an older region like Sinnoh, but that's beside the point. Our current problem with Generations 1, 2, and 3's remakes is that they are kind of more on the inaccessible side if you don't have original copies yourself. Unless you want to get scammed by some random dude on Amazon or eBay who happens to be selling the original copies of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you're kinda out of luck, Chuck, cause otherwise you're spending a couple of $100s. So how do we remedy this, and where do sequels come into play? Well, in this modern era of gaming and, technology in general, things are a lot more accessible to us now. At any given moment, we could just download a game on our consoles at the drop of a hat. Which is why us Pokemon fans have been praying and begging that at some point, they would finally go out of their way to port some of these older games. And I have to, with all my heart, believe that at some point, whether it be on the Switch 2 or whatever comes next in Nintendo's library of potential consoles in the future, that we will be getting access to a lot of the older games in the Pokemon series. The thing is, though, I feel like one of the reasons that they haven't done that is because they need an excuse to make remakes, to make money. Not sure if I ever talked about this before, but this is where we end up at a crossroads here. If they were to give us ports for, let's say, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl and Platinum, then what reason would they have for making Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl? Because in reality, we're not stupid. We would have figured, hey, these games look exactly like Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, I may as well just play Pokemon Diamond and Pearl or possibly Platinum if it's available to me on NSO. And this right here, the reason that I've been yammering on for the last like 10 minutes is the reason why sequels should start coming into play once again. Sequels can solve two major issues off rip. The first of those problems being the redundancy issue for returning players. You and I have played through generations 1 through 5 plenty of times. We know them like the back of our hand at this point. That's an exaggeration, but you get what I'm getting at. The point is, there is no reason for us to need to deal with another Generation 4 remake situation where we get the exact same game just for modern AAA pricing. That's not fair to us. But imagine a sequel. Obviously, in the instance of a sequel, we're getting new characters, new Pokemon access, new storylines, and most likely, brand new mechanics, or at the very least, again, revamped mechanics. Could you imagine for a moment if instead of just basic simple Gen 4 remakes, we got Gen 4 sequels instead? Yeah, sure, it's still Sinnoh. There's still a lot of familiar caves, a lot of familiar cities, a lot of familiar landmarks. But in this sense, if we're following the same idea that Black 2 and White 2 gave us, then it's probably been a couple of years. There's a lot of new faces around town, a lot of new unique trainers from other regions, and a lot of new Pokemon that are roaming around. A lot of cities have been revamped, or maybe there's just a lot of new cities and towns around in general because it's been a long enough time since we've been there. And despite lore purposes, I don't care how it has to happen. It would not be ridiculous, and we don't need to create an entirely new dimension for something like Mega Evolution to be available in the Sinnoh region around this time. And hey, this time around, it's been long enough, you know, it's about time for a brand new evil team to start terrorizing Sinnoh again, you know? A completely new evil team with a completely new goal in mind. And hey, they don't even have to go after Dialga or Palkia this time, or even Giratina. There's other legendaries that we can still very much utilize. I'm just saying, yo, a completely new evil team leader that wants to utilize the power of Darkrai to put the world to sleep permanently so that everybody can have perfect dreams all the time? Come on now, it can't possibly be that easy. You put all that together and we basically have something of a brand new Pokemon game, and in retrospect, it does sound like a lot of work, but here's the thing. If we are going to be building these games from the ground up anyways, we may as well make something entirely new with it. Yeah, sure, the idea of seeing what any of those previous Pokemon games would have looked like in a modern style is a nice idea, but again, I would much rather have a brand new journey to go on as opposed to the exact same journey that I've been on a couple of times beforehand in the past when I originally had these games. And me personally, I'm much more interested in a progressing story. Yeah, battling Cynthia again in that semi-modern style of Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl was nice and all, but I would much rather like to see where she is now. Is she still the champion? Did somebody else take over? Does she have a family now? What is she doing at this current point in time if she's even still in Sinnoh? So with all that being said, I feel like that in of itself is a more than justifiable reason to give us sequels instead of remakes. Oh, hi, yes, excuse me there. Yes, I'm a brand new Pokemon player who's only recently gotten into the series within the last couple of years. Why would a sequel benefit me, somebody who has never played the original games? Well, for starters, Pokemon games have never been developed on the basis that you need to play the originals, not even Black 2 and White 2. So, assuming that sequels would be built with those similar philosophies in mind, you don't really need to worry about playing the originals. That's totally fine. However, on the off chance that you were desperate enough to go out of your way so that you could fully understand all the cameos and references in the inevitable sequels in that timeline, guess what, pal? That's what the ports are for. Let's say in this hypothetical timeline that we were coming up on Gen 4 sequels as opposed to remakes. We'd be about a year out and they would be coming out during the holiday season. What do you have to do until then? Well now, would you look at that? In their recent Pokemon Presents, they have advertised that they are releasing Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum on NSO for you to enjoy throughout the year while waiting for the sequels. Oh my god, should I be the head of Pokemon Company? Is it time? Please know that that is a joke. My ego is not that inflated, but you get what I'm getting at here, right? This just seems like a general tactic that makes everybody happy in the long run. If ports are playable, then I, as well as newcomers to that generation, get to enjoy that while we wait for a brand new experience together. That way, we're all caught up on what's happening and everybody gets the chance to understand the cameos, any plot relevance, or anything along those lines that could happen. In this way, sales aren't affected whatsoever, so you could put the ports out without having to worry about anything. And as a matter of fact, it would probably help sales down the line because now everybody that's played the original games get hyped for the sequels. This way, even newcomers get to experience what the originals were like, and then in these sequels, hypothetically, they get to see how far the series has come. And then, of course, in that scenario, an old head like me wouldn't feel like I was getting cheated because in this way, at the very least, I get something completely brand new out of my favorite region. There's just so many different ways one could go about this, but the long and short of it is, I feel like sequels would end up a lot more valuable than remakes in the long run, especially because they could jump around however they want with this. I completely understand that 90% of us are absolutely sick of looking at Kanto. If you had every single game that Kanto was involved in, you would have visited Kanto 9 different times by now. It also doesn't help that in the games that Kanto is based in, we have the exact same story retold every single time, and then in Johto, we just end up revisiting Kanto, but now there's no story. But could you imagine a certified Kanto sequel? A brand new revised Kanto in 3D with new cities, new towns, new characters, new villains, new gyms, and new Pokemon from all over. I don't know about you, but me personally, an idea like that makes me excited for the possibility of revisiting Kanto. I want to hop into that game and be excited enough to visit Celadon City for the first time in decades, only to find out it looks like Vegas now. And different game corners have different secrets in them because they're all over the place. And so it's up to you to go in there and find out how much Poké Dollars you want to spend trying to find that secret Pokemon that might be amongst all of those winnings. I want to go ahead and do the gym challenge. Maybe it's changed in Kanto after all these years. Maybe they're not doing the traditional gym format. Maybe they have a tournament format like they do in Galar. Again, there is just so many different ways that you could play around with a sequel that could make old regions that we're familiar with a lot more appealing. Especially because, again, if you are building these games brand new from the ground up, why do exactly what you did 20 plus years ago as opposed to just having fun and making new things, new stories, new characters, and new life? I personally just find that to be a much more exciting prospect because new is always going to be more interesting than anything that we've known for the past how many decades now. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about does it for this one. Sorry if this one was a little bit more rambly. I'll definitely make sure to put timestamps, but only because this one more so than ever was rambly because I was kind of like loose with the scripting. I kind of just wanted to record today and I wanted to get this out of the way. I kind of wanted to get into a groove. So that's why, you know, I did linger a lot on some topics more so than others. But regardless of that, I think I have said my piece when it comes to sequels. We could definitely talk more about this in the future, but for now I'm going to pass the mic over to you guys and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree that sequels would be much more exciting than revisiting old overdone remakes and things like that from generations past that we visited hundreds of times beforehand when we had it on the DS era or 3DS era at this point, because we're kind of getting to that point? Or do you think that I'm absolutely out of my mind? We don't need sequels to any of these games. That would be kind of pointless. That would defeat the purpose, and I am completely out of my mind. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I would like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, yep, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
I stay funky, doing donuts in a bin. I stay funky, battle goes wherever I aim. I stay funky, I don't know who's ready to spit. Just know you're going down with my 58 clips. I stay funky, honey's taking back to the crib. I stay funky, get the club popped off like pins. I stay